Welcome to Every Night is Game Night, where two busy dads get games to the table by any means necessary. Check us out, along with other great podcasts, at dicetowernetwork.com.
Every Night is Game Night, episode 163, Building a Game Room and a Game Collection with Jason Peacock.
Yo, my peoples, what's up? Welcome back to Every Night is Game Night, the podcast that helps you get your head in the game. I am your host, Jason. Thank you so much for joining us. I am joined by a fellow Dice Tower contributor. You guys know I had that resolution. I wanted to get more Dice Tower contributors into the co-host chair so that we can chat about games and gaming. I put out a call for a topic, and my friend over here has responded. He is from the Peacock podcast. He does occasional videos for the Dice Tower. He's been doing that for about 3 or 4 years, so you might know him. His name is Jason Peacock. Welcome to the show for the first time.
Thanks for having me on, especially to talk about building game rooms, game tables, and collections. So I don't think that's a topic that's been talked about too much on other podcasts, so I'm excited to talk about it.
So we kept this topic. I say this a lot over on, whenever I close the show, whenever you have a contribution that you wanted to make to the channel, we actually did. This was a topic that was given to us from a listener, Liz Blake Benson. Going to give her a shout out. She hit me up on the Facebook Instant Messenger through the Every Night is Game Night Facebook group. Go ahead and give that a join if you haven't already. And she asked us to talk about game collections, building a game room, storage, accessories, just how do you do the infrastructure? We always say like, okay, let's get games to the table. Well, you got to have a room. You got to have a table. So I put out the call. Jason answered. Thank you so much, my friend.
Happy to fill in.
All right, but before we get to all that good stuff about gaming collections and building a game space that is acceptable to your gaming life, we're going to get to Liz in the Liz We Trust segment. Liz, tell us about another amazing Kickstarter that you are perusing right now.
Hey gamers, this is Liz Davidson from Beyond Solitaire, and I'm here to encourage your Every Night is Game Night acquisition disorder. Today I want to talk about Arceus, soon to be published by Ankama Games. Arceus is a cooperative, story-heavy adventure game in which you play an Egyptian archaeologist who uncovers a mystery and gets a lot more than they bargained for, including hordes of monsters. While I do feel like there are a few too many story-driven cooperative games with miniatures these days, the Egyptian theme is highly appealing, and the design team includes Antoine Bauza and Ludovic Maublanc. The base pledge is about $100, and the campaign ends on November 28th. Happy gaming!
All right. That was the Kickstarter segment. It's funny because we were just chatting before the call about getting some new games and getting all sorts of stuff. Like you're a collector, like me. You're always like, I think you're into what, the Song of Ice and Fire. You're getting new stuff for that. You're like a big board game collection. You got to store it all, right?
Yeah. And I'm at the point now where I've basically had to start building shelves outside of my game room, because the collection's just growing. It's like some kind of monster in a monster movie that it's growing out of its containment area and it's starting to spread. It's like a virus going across my house.
Have you considered culling, my friend?
Yeah, I have called. I've still got like a huge list of games on the local Facebook games. There's just no bites, right? So a lot of my culled games are sitting there in limbo, like toys in the attic.
Well, you're up in Vancouver, right? How's the gaming scene up there?
I spent 10 years in Vancouver, but I'm closer to Kamloops now, so I'm about 3 hours drive from Vancouver. If I was in Van, it wouldn't be a problem. The town I live in is pretty small, and then Kamloops is about 45 minutes away. And there's a little bit of gaming scene there. There's 2 game stores and a Facebook group there.
Mm-hmm. So eventually, when you get to next time you go to a big convention, see if you can help their auction. That's a great way to just dump a bunch of games at once.
Yeah, my friend Dave Luza, who actually lives in Essen or in Dusseldorf outside of Essen, he made a ton of money, for all his Essen games. There's some kind of auction that happens in Hall 7, and everything's prearranged, and it's like, oh, you got that one, here you go. You got rid of a ton of stuff just like that. Bing, bang, boom. So,
all right. Well, we're actually getting way ahead of ourselves. We haven't even gotten to building the collection in the first place. We're already talking about culling. But let us take a step back. We are going to talk about building a gaming environment, building a game room. What do you have? What's there for storage? How do you work shelving? How do you work, accessories for different ways of, maybe you're a person that likes to have different kinds of components, and we're going to get into as much of that stuff as we possibly can. So let's just start with the basics. So game room. So maybe tell us a little bit about your game room right now and how you approached getting that thing started.
So when I first started my game room, it was I bought this house, right? And the whole basement, it was just a big square of concrete. So it was pretty early on. The first reno I did is okay, this is going to be the game room right here. So it was literally created from the ground up. It was just a square cube of concrete. So you get the framing, the drywall, the insulation. There's a wood fireplace at the end of the room too. So everything from the laminate flooring to the insulated ceiling to the walls, all the basic stuff you need to have a room, let alone a game room.
Yep. And
then it was I am a carpenter by trade, so it was shelves were built all along the walls. It can definitely hold between 200 and 300 games on the shelves in the game room. And the table, which started out as a basic version, and I kind of upgraded it later, but it was essentially just a 4x8 piece of plywood with legs on it and some 1x6 trim around the edges, and that was the game table for a few years until so the original table, super simple, anyone can do it. A 4x8 sheet of plywood. I got a sanded sheet of plywood and I stained one side of it. I just put some 2x4 legs on the corners with some braces and some 1x4s around the edge, so it had a little bit of a trim around the edge. And that was it. That was the game table for 4 years.
So when you say, okay, so this is something I wanted to pause on. So obviously, Liz and the people who are suggesting this topic want to really know, okay, how can I DIY this and how can I, get this to happen? So you just said anybody can do it. So it's one of those things where it's you're a carpenter, so any carpenter can do it, or literally anybody can throw this together.
This is literally anyone. This is this is barely carpentry. When I upgraded it, you might want a little bit of carpentry skills, but a 4x8 sheet of plywood. So you essentially have, a tabletop, right, pre-built. You can get it sanded or unsanded. You simply have to paint or stain it, whatever color you want. And then you buy half a dozen 2x4s, right? You double them up, screw them together, cut them to whatever height you want your table. Mm-hmm. You put, two of them screwed together under each of the four corners. And that by itself, it would be a little bit of wobbly, so you use a couple more 2x4s on an angle, right, to brace your four legs going up to the table. So the only carpentry you really need is cutting 45-degree angles on four pieces of 2x4. And
you mentioned before that lasted you, 4 years? That was your legit table for 4 years. How comfortable was that?
It did everything it needed to, right? It was surface play on. It had a little bit of a lip to stop anything from rolling off. And the only reason I upgraded it is because I seen someone else build almost a professional looking table. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, that's cool. It had the cup holders in it and it had slots to put dice. And so I built a second table. It was a 4x4 one with a full, if you see those professional tables where there's a full-on drop down from the edge to the tabletop, everybody's arms are resting where the cup holders are, and then there's a few inches drop down to the actual table surface. So I built a table like that with basically 1x6 thickness of a border around it. Mm-hmm. And like I said, I got cup holders off a casino table website that weren't too much. I etched in little areas to put dice and stuff like that. And then it had a table you can put on top. So you can literally have a game set up. And if you needed to pause that game, you can cover it with the tabletop and then play on top of that. So.
Oh, nice. That's cool.
And then I like that so much. I'm it would be nice if I applied this to the table in the game room, which is kind of next door to, like, I kind of got like an outdoor area, like for outside the game room area, where I've got a second table, which was the new one I built. I've got a pretty big basement here, so I had the space to kind of work with that.
Yeah.
And so then I took that other table apart. I built a nice edge. I got cup holders, and like I've got 4x8 worth of tabletop that I can have maybe a couple games set up. And if I'm in the middle of a review or in the middle of a game with my son or my girlfriend, I've got a tabletop I can put that'll sit on a lip above that game, and then you've got another table on top of that.
What about the actual top itself? Like I've heard, like you can just, in terms of like a DIY, we really want this to be useful for people who are just, putting things together. Maybe they're not, they're intimidated by, having to cut wood or anything, but like, things that they can do. I've heard that, getting kind of a very, very simple table, but putting felt or some kind of material on there. Is that something that you would recommend?
I actually, the first time I built the table, I did get some felt. But it's got that same problem Christmas sweaters have. You're always it's always getting little frizzies all over it, right? So it ends up being a huge pain. I ended up taking that whole thing off because, I tried buying like a sweater trimmer and everything to keep that thing maintained. But
like a lint brush for your game table?
If you fork out the money for like a pool table felt or something like that, that's not real felt, that would be a bit nicer, but that's really expensive. And the felt itself didn't hold up, so I got rid of that completely, and then I just stained the tabletop itself, and I covered it with like a nice thick varnish, right? So it kind of had like a glossy finish to it. And then if you wanted to, you can easily get 4x8 worth or whatever your size is in neoprene mats, and that can be a lining on the bottom of your table.
Interesting. So like that, is that costly? Like a giant? Because I think of the chip theory games, right? It's really nice to put on the mats and everything, but I spend like $1 billion to play a chip theory game. But the actual neoprene mats, that's not that expensive, is it?
I'm not sure. See, the ones I've got when I did the Song of Ice and Fire Kickstarter, they had these 4x4 neoprene battlefields. They had 3 different kinds of them. I got all 3, so they cover my 4x8 table and my 4x4 table.
Oh, so they just hang out there like all the time.
Pretty much, they do, yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Oh, that's a good idea.
I got the 4x4 table. I pretty much always got a game of Mythic Battles Pantheon set up. My girlfriend and I play that once or twice a week. So that's like always set up, and then I put the table panels over top of that game, and if I need the table for anything else, then we just play on top of that. But as far as I was going to say, as far as building the table yourself, there's, it's if you get on Pinterest or YouTube and you just go DIY gaming tables, those YouTube videos can really simplify the project for you. You start there, and then you can kind of go as advanced as you want, but all the answers are there. I found some good blueprints on BGG, and that's what got the wheels turning to build more than just a flat surface with legs.
A flat surface with legs sounds really good. I imagine that most people would kind of stop there.
Yeah, that's all you need.
That's all you really need. So let's talk about like shelving and actually holding some of this stuff. You mentioned before how you were able to kind of build shelving. So what would you recommend in terms of, beginning to approach that kind of thing?
Just had a ton of plying around, or anytime there was like a shelving unit on like the local online yard sale page, I'd grab it up and just kind of integrate that in. Like for me, it was just a matter of throwing plywood together and cutting them to whatever dimensions I needed to cover my walls, right? If I happen to have a shelving unit, I would just kind of screw that to whatever I've had built. So it was just a Frankenstein's monster worth of shelving units that all came together.
So you hear a lot of people talk about shelving, and they mention like the Calyx shelves, the really nice ones that you can see on the Dice Tower, and you get it from IKEA and everything. And that's what you hear as like the baseline of, okay, yeah, if you're gonna buy shelves, get those things. and I'm really skeptical about them. But because I don't know, they seem a little bit too expensive for me. What do you, in terms of like a DIY kind of cost effective solution? Would you recommend just kind of like trying to build as much as you can, or is there a solution out there that you would look out for?
Like I think I've got a calyx shelf integrated into all that, and I just kind of screwed stuff into the side of it. I'm not sure if it's calyx or not. It was just or how I ended up with it, but that was basically like the start, and then I started building shelves off the side or the top of that. But as far as cost effectiveness goes, you just look at what the cost of a 4x8 sheet of plywood is. So say, I don't know, I live in Canada, so say $60 for a sheet of plywood, which you can probably build 2 calyx shelves worth out of, you know what I mean? You buy some brackets and a piece of plywood. So value-wise, you can do so much more with just plywood and screws and brackets. And again, I would encourage you to just look on Pinterest for building shelves, and you'll be blown away by what you can do for cheap, or at least cheaper than a calyx shelf. Because those things are like $120 for a 2x4, like two shelves wide by 4 high or something like that. So yeah, they can add up.
Yeah, and if you have any, I think of calyx shelves as more decorative than actually functional. You know, like they look good in a video, and they look good if you're going to, display a lot and that kind of thing. But if you're really going to because I think both of us, like I have, over 200 games, and you have, you were telling me you have tons of games over there. If you're going to go to that quantity of games, you're going to want to look at something a little bit different.
Yeah, especially the odd size boxes too. You can build stuff exactly the size you need. Like you get Hate and Gloomhaven, you can be like, okay, well I need a shelf this wide by this high by this deep, so this game will fit on there. Or you can decide to stand them up and display them on the top of whatever shelves you got going on. But the advantage of building your own is definitely that you can choose the dimensions that you want to build. You're not limited to.
Well, that's a really good point, because I think people might be intimidated. It's like, oh, I got to buy all these shelves for all these games. Like, it would actually be a really good idea to just say, okay, what game is a really pain in the butt to store? Like, I have Sentinels of the Multiverse big box, and that's a giant box full of, and it's heavy. It's it's just all cards, it's all paper. Or Gloomhaven, or you were saying before, Song of Ice and Fire, or any kind of minis game. Like, you might want to think about just building something just for that, and then coming up with another shelving solution for all your other games.
Exactly. So, I mean, I'm a proponent to plywood, brackets, and a measuring tape, some screws, and kind of do whatever you want. You can fill in whatever areas. If you've got 8 feet of ceiling height, you can build your shelves right up to the top. Divide them evenly with however many floors you can get out of that kind of thing. But you want to make sure that they're big enough to hold, your minimum size you want in there.
Yeah.
Sorry, if you had like 8 feet, for example, right, you could fit 8 1-foot games, but you got to take into account the thickness of the shelves, right? So you're probably going to get 7 separate shelves, and you're going to, make them 16 inches instead of a foot to fit a game, right? So that they're all evenly spaced.
What would you recommend for, so that's like the basic stuffs. In terms of filling out the game room, what would you recommend in terms of like making it feel like an actual place where people can sit and play and have fun and, just like, and feel comfortable?
Well, like I said, I've got the fireplace down there. So for game night, I've always got, I go in there, get a nice fire going beforehand. Bluetooth speaker to have some music on is
there you go.
Is a thing with us too.
You're talking about Mansion of Madness, Eldritch Horror. You probably have some mood music for that stuff.
Definitely. If I can come up with something suitable, for sure. Like if I'm playing Nemesis, I'll put on the Aliens movie soundtrack or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
Surround sound in the game would be nice, but I just have a Bluetooth speaker there. But I've also got, I built a door on my outside of the game room that's like, when it's closed, it looks like the bar on the outside of the game room, like the bar shelves are cut on an angle. So when the door is closed, it just looks like the back of the bar with, I've got all the, bottles with magnets and stuff like that so they won't fall the shelf. And then you literally open up the door and it's like a secret passageway. And the door itself has shelves on it. And then you go in, like when the door is closed, you can't even tell there's a door there, right? So, and then I'm a miniatures painter, so I've got all kinds of shelves that are full of all my painted minis and stuff like that. And nothing says game room like painted miniatures.
The painted miniatures thing, I don't want to get too far into it. I can totally, like, the people who do painted miniatures are just so into it. They really are. And I don't want to get too much into it because I don't want to cheese anybody off. But how easy is it to get into painted minis? How easy is it to get the materials and get the little magnifying glasses and all the different, the different materials that you need? Like, how easy is that to get into?
It's pretty basic to get into. Like, you got to start somewhere. And like I said, in this day and age with YouTube tutorials, it's amazing how quickly you can start producing like pretty good looking stuff with very basic techniques. And the new contrast paint lines is a game changer for new painters because they do the shading and the highlighting in one step, which I've been using for painting like a Song of Ice and Fire because it reduces the amount of time I'm spending. So for new painters to get a contrast paint, like just say you got the whole set, I think there's 36. So the whole set would cost you a couple $100. You can buy some cheap brushes, and that is enough to get going, and your stuff will look pretty decent just right out the gate. And then you just start refining your skills. You start figuring out different ways to do things, find out what works for you. So I would definitely look at these contrast paints, but you don't even need to invest that much. You can just get, say you've got a Zombicide game, you want to start painting them. You can buy like the Zombicide paint sets. It'll have like 6 or 8 different color paints, and they're like $30 or something like that, and that'll get you started, right? But,
yeah, in terms of painting, it seems like if you have a decent amount of games, you're not going to want to paint every single one of those games to like, the most beautiful thing that you can do. There's going to be games where that's just full of plastic and it's just full of blobby stuff, and you can kind of like, okay, I'm going to do a good enough job in these things, and I'm going to build up my skills and really save it for like my favorite game. So like Zombicide, a perfect example. I don't think that Zombicide is a lot of people's favorite game. It's a good game, but it isn't like, the pride of collection type thing like a Mythic Battles would be, or some of the new, or Kingdom Death. That'd be a perfect example of like, okay, this is my pride of my collection. So like warm up on Zombicide.
Exactly.
Then, and then get yourself going. And like I love the way you said that. It's like nothing says game room like a display. You've built it or you've bought it or something of beautiful painted minis.
Yeah, I think so. And like you could get into it for cheap, but I think a couple $100 is probably a realistic entry point to give yourself the right amount of options. And you want some washes and then not too far in, I would recommend a wet palette and an airbrush, which surprisingly you can get for a pretty low price for a starter airbrush.
All right. So then, we have our display, we have our table, and, I think, in terms of the other stuff, like we're talking like, chairs and lighting, I mean, all that stuff is really important. Lighting is super important. If you are, especially if you're in a basement space and you're riding with the usual recessed lights that are in the basement and, the covering is a little bit caked over, you're going to want to, swap some of that around and, get better lighting. Like literally you can do so much to make a game room feel comfortable with just one well-lit table. The walls could be bare, in my experience, and everything else could be just nothing. As long as you have a comfortable table, comfortable chairs, and a good light ahead of you, I think that you're basically well on your way to at least a serviceable game room.
Yeah, lighting's super important, and that's one thing my game room could probably use an improvement on. Yeah, so I bought a pretty nice chandelier, but it lights up half of the game table pretty good. And then I've just kind of thrown around extra lamps and stuff I have kicking around that are plugged into different corners. But if I could upgrade one thing on the game room, it would be beefing up the lighting, getting some more professional looking lights in there, because it does make a big difference.
So what would you recommend on that end? I mean, I know you might have things that you're looking at that you might recommend.
I think... I would recommend what I want to do, which is to consult a lighting professional at a lighting store. They're definitely like that wouldn't be a budget thing, but I think the lighting, like anyone could throw a lamp up here, a lamp up there. That's easy, but to get real, like professional level lighting, I think is a luxury, and that's kind of the next step of what I would add to my game room, and that's I can build anything at a wood, but when it comes to the lighting, I mean, I could wire in any kind of lighting, but as far as getting the right light for the right space and stuff like that, that's where you need that lighting engineer from, and that's the route I would go.
So in terms of like kind of rounding things out, do you have any insights about accessories, like essential things that any game room should have? Like, I think of extra, like bins for tokens or just bins themselves, to have them around to kind of, chuck things. But, in terms of extra dice or extra, like little things, like, is there anything that your game room has or that you wish your game room had?
Well, like you said, bins, like those little Stonemaier trays there, like the little bits bins or whatever game you have. I think so, little tiny bins like that. I've got a bunch of those on a shelf. A little dice rolling thing. It's not essential, but I like having one. Like I got a little
dice rolling thing?
Like an octagon thing where you can roll your dice inside of.
Oh yeah, like a tray. Yeah, dice tray.
Yeah, dice tray. Yeah, so not necessary, but I like having one. I actually want to get one more.
Well, speaking of dice trays, I apologize for interrupting, but you mentioned it. It's funny because I used to play with a guy, D&D, and we played on a very, very, kind of hard flat surface. And he used to roll his dice, like, because you get the big fireball dice, right? Or you're rolling a couple D20, and he would always roll with energy, and the dice would always go all over the place. So if you have a table and there's like flat wood, you're going to want to come up with some kind of solution to handle the aggressive roller. And a dice tray is probably as good as you're going to do. Or maybe just like kind of, some kind of soft surface in front of him or something.
If somebody was rolling all their dice across the table, I would just like very subtly just slide that dice tray on over. Here's a little hint. Maybe you're going to pick up on it. Hey, look, a dice tray is right here beside you. How about that?
Hey, it's a dragon inside the dice tray. Aim for the dragon. All right. So you were mentioning before TV, having a TV in the game. That was a little bit difficult because in terms of marrying technology and gaming, some people they don't want technology in their game rooms at all. It's like put away your phones and we're not going to watch TV. It's time for games.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say that I almost never use the thing. It's primarily to put some Netflix on while the kids are sitting in there while I'm doing something gaming related, but like I envisioned like we playing Manchester Madness or something like that and put the app up on the TV. But the TV I was going to say is like not a very, I don't see it as very much of a necessity at all. Maybe watching how to play videos before game or something like that. But I'm the type of person that hates being told the rules. I love reading rule books, so I usually like being the one to figure out how a game plays and teach everyone else.
That's a really good point. Like, you kind of have to figure out what kind of person you are. And I'm going to get into that when we talk about kind of building a game collection and culling games and all that kind of thing. Well, it's a great point because you have, even just learning games, like you playing games is a thing. Of course, you want the room to be comfortable for that. But you can make the room comfortable to learning games as well. Like if you're a person that needs to watch Rodney Smith or you need to watch somebody else, you almost don't want to, like, you don't want people on their phones. And I think that we both agree with that. It's like, keep your phones away. It's inevitable. People are addicted to our phones, but like, let's minimize that thing. So if you can have if you're a person who loves videos, you might want that TV in there just to pop up and say, okay, we're going to learn viticulture now. We're going to learn something now. Let Rodney teach us and then we can go. So like, and that way you can say, okay, put your phones down. I don't know how you feel about like phone gaming and phones and all kind of thing.
I prefer it if everybody's focus is on the game.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right, because if you're always like, "Hey, it's your turn," then then that person is kind of giving off a signal like, "Oh, I'm enjoying being on my phone more than I am sitting across from you lot, and getting invested in what we're all doing." But that's not really a problem with my game group. So, luckily nobody's really on their phone or glued to their phone when everyone's in the game.
I love that. Like if you're a person, because I kind of am, I like to watch a rules video. I like to do it all. Like the way I learn rules, I'll watch a playthrough. I'll watch Rodney or whoever, and then I'll read the rules, and then I'll read the rules in front of me with the video. Like I like it all, because I pick up a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit there. But it'd be nice if I just kind of put up a TV in the room, be like, okay, let's put this on. I'm going to watch this video for 5 minutes and then go. But if you're not that type of person, if you're a person that loves the rules and you're a good teacher, then get that thing out of here. Let's keep this thing as low tech.
Yeah, if I get rid of the TV, I can build another two shelves about 4 feet. Yeah, I could probably fit another 16 games there where the TV is.
Mm-hmm.
So
nice.
Because
you need more games.
Yeah. Yeah. After coming back from Essen, I've got a I've got to start finding some room. Then again, I've got my office here. I can always, I can just build shelves right across my office wall and put another 200 games in here. Push really came to shove.
So, I mean, not to get too personal over here, but how big is your game collection? Do you have any idea?
I would say between 200 and 300.
Okay, that's not the worst.
I think if I said 250, I'd be pretty close. Could be 275. Let's see. I haven't updated my BGG collection. I haven't updated in forever. I've been meaning to, but I'll see what it was at the time I did update it. I think it was at about 125, and that was probably about 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fair to say that more have been coming in than going out. Okay, so I had 209 about 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Oh yeah, you're way past that.
No, it's probably closer to 10.
So, and anybody who builds a collection does not aim for a number; it just kind of like happens. But so we can kind of start talking about kind of building that collection. So you've been into modern gaming not too long, right, Jason?
Let's see, maybe 6 years.
Yeah,
5,
so in
6
years you've been able to build a collection of about 200. How long did it take you to get to that number?
That's hard to say. Maybe, it's been consistently growing up until now. So when you first get into the hobby, you just kind of go ballistic. You're like, oh, that looks cool. That looks cool. That looks cool. Oh, wow. Right. And you just want everything. And, especially if you start watching reviews or top 10 lists, that kind of thing, and, your want list, goes from, 5 to 100 and every day, right? You're just like, oh, that looks so cool. Because there's just such a huge pool to grow from. And after a couple of years, your tastes start to get a little bit more refined, right? Mm-hmm. Like if you've got 100 worker placement games, you're not going to get all excited about the next worker placement game.
Mm-hmm.
But a worker placement game that does something really original that you don't kind of, that seems like the decisions will fascinate you, then it's like, okay, well, I like worker placement games. This one seems to do something new, so I want that one, but I don't even care about those other 5. I've seen that kind of stuff before. None of those are really, making the cogs in my brain turn too fast. So,
mm-hmm. When you were building games, so this is how I brought it. Like you said, I went ballistic when I first started. I remember I started with Lords of Waterdeep when it first came out in 2012. With like hobby games. I'd been into like kind of games before, but like Lords of War was my first hobby game. And then I found Pandemic, and then I found Sentinels, and those were like the 3 games that I just played solo, co-op, with people over and over and over again. And that's where I was like, okay, I gotta do this, gotta build this collection. So I bought a bunch of games that were similar. So I bought a lot of adventure games, and I bought a lot of cooperative games, and I kind of built from there, like a stone and the ripples go out. And then I hit a point where it's like, okay, I want to be a person that hosts a lot. So I want to build like a diverse collection. So I want games for like 6 players, and I want party games, and I want this, and so I ended up growing the like that's how my collection got so big, because there's all these categories that I felt like I had to fill, because I had to be prepared if my group or whatever, people I'm playing with are in the mood for something. I need to be covered just in case we want to play a bluffing game or something. So, I mean, is that kind of how it built, or were you more kind of in tune with yourself and like what you liked when your collection was exploding?
definitely started out being the stuff I was into. Well, I remember when, like, the first thing that got me into hobby board gaming is my brother had Catan, and he lent it to me and my wife at the time, and we were just like, oh, this is so much fun, right? So we borrowed that for a couple of months, and we were playing all the time. And my father, who owns a board game store back in Ontario, actually, North Bay Games and Hobbies, he had given me King of Tokyo and Carcassonne. So those two games right there just kind of started my love for the hobby board gaming. And then he told me about Tabletop with Will Wheaton, so I was watching that all the time, and I was getting games that were displayed on Tabletop, like Takanoko, Small World. They all looked wonderful and amazing, right? And they did a good job of selling how fun those games are. And then, then I probably had a collection of, maybe 30 games. Like, I remember Zombicide, just the concept of that seemed so cool. I'm not so crazy about it now because of my tastes have evolved, and, that game basically boiled down to, I didn't like how long the zombie turns took. Like, it was such laborious upkeep when the game got crazy, right? Because you're moving all these zombies and you're figuring stuff out, and it just slowed the game right down. And then when
Zombicide was the first game that I bought and then sold. I was like, oh my god, that looks so great, and I'm gonna kill zombies and everything. And then I actually played it a couple of times. And it's like, oh, I'm shooting my friend, and it's real easy, and I'm moving 20 zombies on a turn, and I don't know where they're going. All right, sold.
Oh, I hated that rule where you automatically shoot your friends, and I house ruled that out there right away. I wouldn't play the game with it. I'm glad it's gone now.
Yeah, it's gone now.
And I tried second edition at Essen as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I did
Is that cleaner? Was that better?
Definitely cleaner. They don't of course they brought the trays in, so you guys have, trays like all the rest of the newer Zombicide stuff. But rather than a zombie spawning in every single room when you open up a building, they just spawn in the shaded rooms. So they got rid of, there's less zombie upkeep every round, which is and there was face-down cards that when you went on them and spent an action, you flip them up, and it would give you parts of a story and tell you to put other stuff on the map. So the initial setup is a lot more limited because you don't necessarily have to put everything on the board right away. As you progress through the mission and flip these cards up, different story things have to unfold, right? So for example, we go inside a first building, and then we find a detonator or something like that, right? So we're like, okay, now we got a detonator. So when we get up to another card, it's the outside the White House, right? And the only way to open this concrete is by blowing it open because all the security doors are closed. So it's like, oh, well, we have that detonator. But different parts of the story and different objectives unfold as you progress through, as opposed to having everything on the map at once and then, and then getting into it. So setups reduced. The combat, again, you don't automatically kill your friends, which is good.
I wanted a Zombicide where I didn't have to play 6 players, because in Black Plague you have to play 6 players, and I think in Vader you have to play multiple players. I just want to be like 1 or 2 dudes, and then go to town. I think the original Zombicide was like that. It's like you just go, you don't have that overhead in front of you.
Depends on the scenario. I think they had scenarios for 4 survivors, 2 survivors, 6 survivors. Good. So if you play 2-player, you got to use 3 survivors each.
So as long as there's options for lower play count, that's good.
Yeah, but it didn't blow me away. I did play Cthulhu Death May Die at Essen, and then I was like, that was really fun. I'm glad I backed this one.
All right. So in terms of this is what the games this is how we got into the hobby. Like, we found a couple of games that we loved, and then the games kind of exploded like kudzu on top of the base thing from there. And then you mentioned before how we hit a point where your taste refined. I like to refer to that as when I first started, I bought every game that I rated a 6, and then it kind of got up. Then I bought every game that I rated a 7, and now it's gotten to the point where it's like I'm even looking at some of my 8 out of 10 rated games, and I'm going, do I really need you? Because you get to 200 games, that's just a ton, and storage becomes hard, and am I really playing all these things? So in terms of your journey, where you're at, do you think that you'll kind of stay at this equilibrium of kind of 200-ish games, or do you foresee it kind of like growing and growing without kind of a culling moment?
I would like it to be, yeah, at a certain level. Like, I definitely want to get to a point where these ones here, like, I've got other games that are better, and this will never get played. I'll get rid of it, kind of thing. And I've started doing that, right? Like, there's games that are on my sell shelf that I'll never play. But there's two things about, you know, having a game collection. There's the anxiety you get that you're not going to get, you know, the plays that if you could just freeze time and just play all the games you want, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's only so many, you know, times you can sit at the table and play a game. And if you got 200 games, you know, realistically, you're going to go years without playing some of those, right? Because you don't have an opportunity to. So you've got that, but you've also got the satisfaction of just having a particular game in your collection. Like if something comes in, it's like, well, I have a stack of 10 games to play here, but I can't wait till that game shows up in the mail just so I can put it on my shelf and know I have it. You know, there's some kind of weird satisfaction of just owning a game you're stoked about, right? It's that little bundle of potential sitting in that box over there. It's going to be so fun when you do play it. And I don't know if it's just me, but there's a certain satisfaction that comes from just owning a game I know I might not play for another month, or that might not hit the table, you know, more than once a year, or once every 2 years.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because so now we're talking about, you know, we get into that equilibrium point and there's going to be like a 1 in 1 out type scenario, or like a replacement scenario where like the new, you know, hotness will replace something directly in our group. So like if you have Zombicide, but then you get Cthulhu May Die, then bye-bye Zombicide, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But you mentioned before about how you have games that are just like you get them and you're probably not going to play them for a little while, and probably maybe not even for a long while. And yet there's this joy and there's this like, ooh, I have this. It's enough to know that I could play it. It's enough to know that I'm prepared just in case it actually does, you know, I get a chance to do that, like a bundle of potential. And you go onto certain forums and people, you know, they talk about the shelf of shame, you know, quote unquote. They talk about all the unwrapped games, and it's like, oh my God, I got to get my unwrapped games down. And there's kind of all this anxiety about getting their shelf of shame down. So how do you approach the idea of like a shelf of shame, you know, in the context of what we're talking about with, like, you know, games as bundles of potential and all that kind of stuff?
I actually have a shelf of shame, and it's whenever I get a game, I put it on there, but I actively try and, you know, get a game or two off there once a week at least, right? So
Right.
like my 10-year-old is good to game with, and my girlfriend's a big gamer too. Plus I have my Tuesday night game group, so I'm lucky where, you know, I can probably get in, you know, anywhere between 2 and 4 decent game nights a week. So yeah, learning. So it's like, okay, so I want to play one that, you know, I want to see if I like it, if it's worth keeping or whatever. And then, you know, we'll play one that you already know the rules to, so you don't have to rack your brain learning, you know, another new game, that sort of thing.
Like tonight, before we were on the call, I had I had two people over. We played Marvel Champions. I just got it in it like maybe yesterday, and you know, you have to learn the rules, and you have to have overhead and everything, and that was fun. And we spent like 90 minutes doing it. So like, okay, we just have a little bit of time left. We whipped out Goncho and Clever, which I hadn't played in about a year, but it was fun. And I'm glad I had it. Like, and it's one of those games where I don't need to own it. Like, I have the app and I don't really need it, but I'm glad I had it for that particular scenario because they were in the mood for that. They were like, I also have some other roll and rice, but they weren't in the mood for those things. They wanted a particular experience, and that kind of fit right in there. So if I'd have culled it, I wouldn't have had it. We wouldn't have had that joy, you know?
And I always look at too, like my game collection, like if this has been used a lot too, but if I go see a movie in town, it's going to cost me between $50 and $100, depending on how many people in the family go, right? You know, board games typically going to cost between $50 and $100, and I'm generally happy if I can play a game twice. I feel, and I paid $60 for it. I feel like I got my money's worth out of that game already. You know, just playing it twice. I'll play it 3-4 times and forget about it. It's like, wow, now the game's paying me.
I love that. Yeah, because there's so much fraughtness that enters into this question of, okay, I need to get maximum value out of my game. I can't waste money. I can't, I can't waste shelf space. And I don't know. I just feel like I just go back to one of the things I said before. Like when I buy a game, it's actually, depending on the game, it's enough to know that there's a potential there, and it's enough to know that I'm kind of prepared for something, and it's enough to know that I love playing it. Like I'm kind of past the point of having games for other people. I sold all those games. Like Catan. I kept Catan in my collection for a long, long time. Splendor, a couple of other those types of games that I didn't love, but I know other people loved. And it's like, all right, other people have those games. I don't need those. I know people who have them. All right, I'm just going to move those on. And the games that I have, these 200 some odd games, they give me pure joy. They really do. And even if I don't play them for years, I don't care. And a lot of people don't vibe with that. They think like, okay, it's almost like they have a timer. It's like, okay, I have this game is 1 year, and if it doesn't get played 1 year, I'm selling it. It's like, why? I don't know. That mentality just doesn't make sense to me. It seems very kind of anxiety ridden.
Yeah, everybody's got their own rules that work for them. So like some people, they want every game in their collection to be something they play. They want to keep their collection less than 100 games, one in, one out. If they haven't played it in a year, it means the game is not that great to them, right? If they haven't played it in a year, then, it's like when I'm walking around my house, I'm like, what is this? I haven't used this thing ever, so I'm just going to throw it in the garbage. I don't even know what it is, So,
yeah.
With other things in my life, it's like, well, the last time I've used this, flashlight or this tool, I've never used this tool. I don't even know what it does. Well, throw it in the garbage, right? If I've lived this long without using it or knowing what it is, it can go. So people can have the same mentality with their games, right? So it depends on how much of a collector you are, how much having that matters when you know you're probably not going to play it again. Like same with books. Usually it's very rare to book twice. But people like to keep books they enjoy on their shelf. And that's the same way I am with games. Like if I'm probably not going to play a game for 5 years, like when I say I love reading rule books, in a sense, I want that experience. Like the art of a game is how it's designed. So you read the rule book to see how this designer put everything together. And when you play it, you experience that art. And if it's something that might not play all the time, but it was a great experience, it's almost like having a great book on your shelf too. It's like one day I'll go back to that. It was really fun. It was cool. And, I enjoy the fact that I have that there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the general advice. I think one of the things that Liz and the person who suggested this topic, and by the way, thank you so much, and invite anybody else who wants to contribute topics and everything. I think one of the things they were getting at was how should I approach my collection, And to me, it's like, just find your joy, like there are people who only get joy out of having like a really slim collection, and, they only want to keep the games that are just going to hit the table over and over again. That's cool. And there's people who want 200, 300 games, and it's just enough for them to know that there's like I love the way you put it, this like bundle of potential that's just sitting there. And the potential is enough to give you joy. Or maybe you just like the way it looks, like a big old wall of games, properly shelved and displayed. Looks cool. I had somebody coming down here. I sold a washing machine. The previous owners had left one here. And the two people that came down, they get the washing machine. They looked at my shelf. They went, wow. And and I love that because I told them I do podcasts for the Dice Tower, and I can give you advice about games, and I didn't have to say that, but like they got that from looking at my big old collection. I haven't played a lot of these games in years. I don't care. It brings me joy. So it's like, find your joy, and if the joy is having a lot of games, a few games, if it's a million games or just like one type of game, just follow that, and don't be afraid. Don't let other people online especially knock you off of your joy. Don't let them make you second guess. That happens a lot too.
Don't let someone else take you off your path of joy, right? Don't let someone else derail you from what you find happy.
Yeah, I find that happens a lot where people will post or they'll ask a question and they'll get people that are like, okay, do it this way or do it that way. Whatever your joy is, man, if you want a ton of games, if you want a little game, or, in your room, do you want like a DIY table or do you want something like built and fancy and, like just whatever makes you happy, whatever, and not just like happy, but whatever like brings you that deep sense of joy. Like I know I'm going like Marie Kondo right now. You know who Marie Kondo is, right?
Yeah. Tidy, the art of tidying up. get rid of anything that doesn't bring you joy. Yeah.
Be that way about your games. And if your game is giving you joy just sitting there for 5 years, then keep it. It's giving you joy. But if it's not, if it's not giving you joy.
Look at Blu-ray collections. Like, how often are you going to watch a movie? Like, people love collecting movies that they love, but rarely are you going to watch that movie more than the first time you get it. You know what I mean? It's going to change forever. And with game collections too, your attitude towards it will change over time. Like, you know, in 5 years, I might just be like, I do not want all these games. I'm never going to play them. And it's just going to be easy for me to scale down to whatever. I know people that have just done it for, you know, a number of reasons, but got out from 200 games down to 50 games just because their attitude has completely changed. They went from being a collector to, I just want the ones that I play all the time, and everything else is a waste of space in my house. So, I mean, depending on where you're at in life and what's going on and where your priorities are at, your attitude towards your game collection can completely take a 180.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it might change. You know, I think it was Dan Hughes that posted about, like, he had a big old collection, but then he culling, and now it all fits on one shelf.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine it. Leave my games alone.
And then Mike Delisio, he just did his co-host on Sporadically Bored there, just did like, I think he's moving into his, like, so his reason is that he was moving, but he still had to do that vicious call and get, you know, make some big tough decisions, right? There's a lot of games you can love. It's like, oh, this game's beautiful. It's got great components, but it takes 6 hours to play, and I'll probably won't play it in the next 10 years. So there you go. You got to go.
So, I mean, I think we covered a lot of ground in terms of building a collection, building a room, making it comfortable, making it your own. You can either build stuff or, you know, get stuff or your own. You know, hopefully we've given you some ideas to, you know, things to think about. And also in terms of building your actual game collection, you know, we have, I think Jason and I are kind of aligned in our philosophies. We both have bigger collections, but we're okay with that because even the unplayed games give us, you know, a sense of joy. So is there anything else, my man, you know, in terms of a topic like this that we should be, you know, talk about or anything like that?
What's your number one game? Is it Pandemic?
Oh, yeah, it's Pandemic. Pandemic. I have all the expansions and fit in one box. That took a little while to get all the expansions in one box because the stupid insert. They stopped the insert at like 2 expansions, but they should have just kept going. Give me a better insert. Which I'm not a broken token guy, so just it still is too expensive. Pandemic and all the historical ones. I mean, I don't know. I cannot foresee any game dethroning that game at this point. It's perfect for me.
Have you tried
How about yourself?
Horrified?
Oh yeah, sure. I got Horrified right over here. It's excellent.
I hear that's pandemic-y in the way it plays.
It's easier. And it's easier to get into. I find it more like it's not as good. It's not as solidly. It's not as tight. You know, like games can be really easy if you just get the right, or you just lose to luck. So it's very kind of more family weight-ish. Like Pandemic is a very tight system. You could tell it's almost like a Knizia game, but Horrified is just this kind of romp, and I love that because I can get it to the table with more people. You know, like I can get it to the table with like a 15-year-old who doesn't really care about games, but he knows Dracula and he knows whatever. Oh yeah, dude. No, Horrified is an excellent one. That one's staying around. It gives me joy. How about yourself? What's your favorite game?
Blood Rage.
Really? Wow. Okay. Are you back the original Kickstarter? You have all the crazy miniatures? I'm sure.
I got everything painted for it. That was pretty early on though. If I look at them now, it's almost like, oh, I wish I could repaint these. They're not that great, but well, the monsters look all right. But yeah, the army dudes themselves, they, you know, they're, you know, it's nice to look. I can look at my zombie side and then my Blood Rage and then the stuff I'm doing today, and you can definitely see like that improvement in quality over the years, which is cool. So it's always like nice to see where you've come from and where you're at.
All right. So I think that we have covered the topic pretty well. Anybody else that has any such recommendations for a podcast, for podcast ideas, for guests, Please hit me up, ENGN_podcast, Every Night is Game Night Facebook group, everynightisgamenight.com. Jason, if they want to hear more about you, your ideas, your content, where can they go?
Well, my main output, I think, is a review contributor for the Dice Tower. That's where my focus is at right now, and that's where I want to start increasing my production. So I think the main place to see me is popping up on the Dice Tower feed of doing reviews. And then I've got the Peacock podcast on YouTube, which is kind of my experimental, test channel, I guess. Like I'm trying to find my ground to figure out exactly what I want to do with it. But that's pretty much where I'm at. You can check me out on Twitter at Jaspylodum, my Star Wars name. First two letters of your first name, blah, blah, blah. Jaspelodm. And then I'm always posting pics of what I'm playing on there and try and keep it pretty board gamey as opposed to as opposed to getting involved in more serious issues. But so that's pretty much where you'll find me.
All right, my friend. That was Jason Peacock. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks so much for having me. It was a good time. It was fun to talk about. Anytime.